This is my English 231 service learning class, autobiography and biography. What we did in the class and what we will do for our presentation today is I'm going to tell you all a little bit about what the intention was in this class and what our goal was. And then this is the full complement of the class. We had a really good workshop size group. I know that when I teach a workshop, if I have too many people, they don't really get a chance to read their work, think about each other's work. So because this is an advanced writing class, this complement worked out really well. And they're all good writers. So in autobiography and biography, which was English 231, what we did was the course invited students to read and write and consider biography and autobiography, which is writing about others, that's biography, and writing about the self, which is autobiography and memoir. Consider it as a cultural lens rather than as a purely solipsistic, here I am writing about me and all my glory kind of thing. So we thought about who are we, why do we write what we write about ourselves or about others who matter to us? What do we want other people to know about our stories or the stories that matter to us, and why? So we looked at these ideas from a variety of angles, including the role of place in writing about lives, because we all live in a place, come from a place. What the meaning of place is was very open to debate in this class, and you'll hear some of that, and I encourage that debate. So with that idea in mind, what is place and how does that influence a writer, we engaged in a service learning project at the Andalusia Farm in Milledgeville, Georgia, which is about 2 hours from here. And Andalusia Farm is the home of the American writer Flannery O'Connor. And as a class, we read some O'Connor work, both fiction and nonfiction. And then on the property, we interacted with some of the artifacts, some of the locations, and the sense of place integral to O'Connor's work in fiction and nonfiction. Who am I, O'Connor might ask, and how does that show up in what I write about and how I perceive the world? Additionally, Elizabeth Peterson here at the Oglethorpe Museum of Art worked with us to develop an overview of the role of a writer's house in their life and their legacy. So I am delighted to introduce you to the students of English 231 Service Learning, Autobiography, and Biography, and we'll hear their thoughts about the role of place in writing, writing about real lives, and then I invite you to participate in the discussion that we'll have pursuant to their reading a selection of their work. We're going to start with Dutch. And what I'd like you to do is introduce yourself, introduce what you're going to talk about, and then talk about it. And I'll just call out who's next as we go. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Quataize Dutch. I am a senior here at Oglethorpe University, and I'm going to talk about more of my experience of life writing and what I experienced in this class this semester. First off, I would like to say that with life writing, I came up with like a mantra. We talked about like what is life writing to you, and I kind of came up with a slogan that like life writing takes you places. And I'll kind of explain that like a little bit more. I'm pretty sure, well, I'm suggesting everyone have heard of the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. And I'll give a little synopsis. It's about 4 best friends, and they spend a week apart, well, a whole summer apart, and the only thing that kept them together were a pair of pants. And each friend get the pants for 2 weeks. And these pair of pants, you know, it goes to adventures and everything with all 4 of the best friends.
Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is news to me. All right.
Yeah. I'm kind of matching out with how like life writing is.
Okay.
And surprisingly, like all 4 best friends are like different body sizes, but somehow the pants fits every one of them perfectly while they're going on their adventure. And going back to life writing, how that compared, I feel that's what life writing is to all of us is. I want to say a pair of pants, but it fits everyone perfectly. It doesn't matter where you're from, where you're going. It really fits to you, and it actually takes you places and have adventures. And it's an invitation to many cultures, and that's what setting is mostly. That's what I learned about before coming to this class. I wouldn't say I had like a one-minded inside mind. time when it came to setting. But actually going on the trip, going to Flannery O'Connor, you're open to different cultures and you're open to different things and people and action. That kind of helps you with your writing. I know that helps me with mine because it diversified my writing. And I'm more so of a visual writer and a learner too. So I learned that going out to various places and actually seeing how people actually communicate and actually interact with each other, it actually brings out the realism, I guess, in your paper or in your story as well, because you're actually there and looking at it. So one thing that I did learn from this semester is that in order to, I feel like for me, in order to write something that's meaningful and that's really realistic, you have to actually be in that world. You have to, take the time out to be in the trip and just look and analyze everything, because just a little description from the chair or the outside of the birds chirping, the color of the birds, that kind of helps and brings out the colorful of your story, the color of your story. I do want to read like an excerpt from the Flannery O'Connor trip and how I experienced that. So I guess I'll just read it.
Sure.
While my peers and professor enjoyed the openness of the field, I saw a cage. I was boxed in this conflicting history of mine. I came back to free my ancestors. I whispered to the field and told them they were free. You are free, I told them, but they stayed and kept working. I tried my best to imagine her life at the farm, but I couldn't believe I was actually walking on an old plantation. This was the first time I ever walked on a plantation. It was a surreal moment for me because I too would have been a slave during those days. And now in the present time, I am free. I walked in a house and used the restroom. If I would have tried that back in the day, I would have been killed. I just want to talk about that experience just a little bit and how, again, setting is an invitation to many cultures. Initially, we was going there for Flannery O'Connor and looking at how she was raised and, get a good sense of her background story, of her many adventures. But like I said, when I got on that, it was an invitation to a different world in a sense. I didn't see Flannery O'Connor. I don't know what triggered me because no one mentioned a plantation, none of that stuff. I legit just caught the feeling. And I want to say it was a bad thing. Again, it helps you to be exposed to many different things and help you realize your surroundings and whatnot. And so, again, going back to how I think setting helps me as a writer, I feel like that was an important development for me as a writer because I actually got to see the field. I actually saw like the trees. I was just imagining what some of the tree branches was used for, and I saw like the actual tools and stuff that they actually worked on the farm. And so setting, it was a very important thing for me. It helped me realize, again, like imagery and setting is like very important and actually create that realism to your story.
Thank you. Thank you. And what we'll do is we'll go, as everyone will read or discuss their work, and then we'll go back and have some questions and some crosstalk about it. Thank you very much, Dutch. I appreciate it. Tori.
Hi, my name's Tori, and I'm a senior, and I'm a double major in English and Communications. I'm going to be reading from what I wrote while we were at Flannery O'Connor's farm, but it's not necessarily like pertinent to the farm itself. It was just how place felt to me while I was there. So the first half of it is more like what is place and like how does it build us, and then the second part is the importance of preserving a place where somebody has written and created. So, yeah. Place is complicated. How vast is place? I came from the universe, which can be considered a place, and because of this, my veins are filled with stardust. I come from Earth, which means I need oxygen to live and thrive. I come from America, thus I bleed freedom and shed tears of freedom abused in a land that preaches but does not practice, that claims truth but seems oh so blind to it. I come from Montana, And still to this day, despite distance and time, my heart beats with the wildness of that place. I come from Louisiana, and this world-blending of culture fills my lungs, echoing of a past less than holy and tasting of spices and overbearing religion. But placed within me is carved of all of these things. The stardust connects me to every molecule and atom of the galaxy. The oxygen connects me to every beating heart. Freedom demands my inner voice to burst out to create itself in places where its hollow shadow lives. The wildness calls me to the connection to leaves and wings and fur and sky. And the culture bubbles up celebration for humanity, for what we have wrought merely from reorganizing ideas and elements into infinity. So places anywhere, this heartbeat, like an eager drum march, starts again. Any place where my mind bleeds ink, and finally, that space that brings me back to this inner sanctuary of spiraling creativity, the space that moves and is hard to catch. Place is terribly complicated. Every place that I have experienced has likely left a mark on me, and through me, my writing. While before this class, I focused most of my life on fiction writing, on poetry, on really anything but nonfiction. This class let me realize that place can be terribly impactful. While place is vital to most life writing, because a story without a setting is hard to get into, places experienced by the author can be important even for fiction. A coffee shop described in a fiction piece will have in it parts of every coffee shop you have ever been to, or even parts you imagined up, but even that is based on what you've learned from the ones you have been to. Place is very impactful. While for this class we read many authors, two are the most important for me. Flannery O'Connor's importance, of course, encouraged by our trip, is a good example of how place can impact even fiction writing. In almost every piece I read of hers, I could see the farm where she had spent so much of her life. The water tower lights up pink during the sunset, and I knew that even before I really saw it. Even though Flannery's works were all such different stories, they did not deviate too far from the way that her life actually was. Place is as important to the reader as it is to the writer. For some writers, place defines them. Where they come from and where they live weighs so heavily on their writing that even their fiction feels realistic, because it's so embedded in place. Place can be a powerful tool to drag a reader beneath the surface of the work, or just the backdrop to the living, breathing characters that pull readers in all on their own. My other author, the one that I chose to write about, Annie Dillard, used place more as a backdrop. While Dillard and I never really were able to truly connect, her writing was artful. After I did some research on her, I found that one of her fiction works is set in a rural area, one so far removed from where she lived as a child in Pittsburgh. And it was enough to make me interested in how she removed herself so far from a place she called home. And then this is the second part on why preserving place is important. For the greats, preserving their home is incredibly beneficial to those who want to connect. When you read to someone's work, you connect with them on one level, where your souls can brush. But seeing and experiencing their homes is different. Your souls can temporarily walk together. Divided by time and distance, you can travel with them, side by side, through their space. That is the reward for preserving their homes. The walls will always lose something, but what they retain is quite long-lasting. Perhaps their soul can inspire yours with words not yet written, or stories temporarily left untold. Their preserved home is a symbol of their mark on the world, and many writers strive for this, strive to not be forgotten. In the backyard of Andalusia Farm, it's easy to picture where a lot of Flannery O'Connor's stories took place. The feeling of the supply shed, the barn, and the milk shed are all abandoned now. But it's too easy to picture people getting their tools from the shed in the morning and wandering off to find their tasks. I can imagine voices as they greet each other, the morning people louder and brighter, and those who could have slept longer, quieter, and vaguely irritated. Apart in the circle and the fire, a piece that Flannery O'Connor wrote, where the hooligans, to borrow Elizabeth's word, came out of the milk shed with milk on their faces is easier to see. In the backyard, it's easier to feel how Flannery could have experienced the evenings. The winds of the place rush past you, bringing it with it the sound of whistling metal and the buzzing of the peat-bell. The scent of earth and sweet gums surrounds you, reminding you of the solid Georgia clay under your feet. The sight of red brick and weathered wood, pieces that Flannery herself would have seen, reminds you that despite the passage of time, some things are more long-lived than we are.
Very nice. Thank you. We're giving you ideas to talk about when you're done with the individual reading. Bailey.
Hi, my name is Bailey Fabricius. I'm a senior, and I'm going to be reading about Place as a character, playing the role of both a protagonist and an antagonist in Lucy Grayle's memoir Autobiography of a Face and Flannery O'Connor's short story Parker's Back. The sense of place in prose, whether current location or a location in the past that one frequently visits, is one of the most important aspects of an author's writing. In fact, place plays such a vital role in a story's overall setting and plot that it can truly be referred to as a character in the role of a protagonist and an antagonist. In Lucy Grayle's memoir, Autobiography of a Face, the author's place plays both the roles of protagonist and antagonist in her search for true happiness and the realization that it can be found anywhere. In addition, Flannery O'Connor's short story, Parker's Back, uses place, specifically that of the front porch, and begins as a positive environment, thus a protagonist, and ending as a place that Parker loathes, and eventually where he becomes unwelcome. Throughout O'Connor's story, the reader experiences the character shift of the front porch as it transforms into the antagonist. Both pieces rely heavily on the sense of place, and in Grayle's memoir especially, she shows how different places have shaped who she has become, and the positive and negative effects are the same. Essentially, how an author is shaped by place affects their character's search for truth. After visiting Andalusia Farm, I attained a better grasp on what it truly means to incorporate place into one's writing, and how it is not only an important part of the work in terms of creating the scene or background, but also how it itself can play a character role. Sometimes place can be seen negatively and can make a huge impact on characters' lives. However, place can also be a positive asset to the story and to the main characters' lives in that it can shape the way a child is raised, be present for early childhood memories, and even become a place of nostalgia in the character's adult life. Many of the settings that O'Connor used in her stories originated from her experiences at Andalusia, and these settings were both positive and negative in nature. For example, in Parker's Back, O'Connor writes how Parker met his wife, Sarah Ruth, and spent many hours on her front porch with her, getting to know her and falling in love. These were happy memories for Parker and for Sarah Ruth. It was plain to Parker, after he had visited 3 times, that she was crazy about him. However, now that he and Sarah Ruth are married, he looks at her splitting beans on the front porch as an unappealing and unhappy pregnant woman and loathes her, as well as the location around her. O'Connor says Parker understood why he had married her. He couldn't have got her any other way. But he couldn't understand why he stayed with her now. She was pregnant, and pregnant women were not his favorite kind. Nevertheless, he stayed, as if she had him conjured. He was puzzled and ashamed of himself. This place, the porch, was once a protagonist, a place that brought the two together. However, now it has become an antagonist, separating the two and making them unable to withstand each other's company. In Grayle's memoir, she uses multiple locations that act as protagonists and antagonists, and in some cases, these locations play both roles. For example, growing up with a deformed face made for a very disruptive and upsetting childhood for Grayle, especially in junior high school. The author, who is also the narrator, dreaded going to school after she was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma because of the teasing and taunting she received from her classmates. She says, "They pointed openly and laughed, calling out loudly enough for me to hear, 'What on earth is that? That is the ugliest girl I have ever seen.' I knew in my heart that their comments had nothing to do with me, that it was all about them appearing tough and cool to their friends. But these boys were older than the ones in grade school, and for the very first time I realized they were passing judgment on my suitability, or lack thereof it, as a girlfriend. School was Lucy's enemy that destroyed her inner confidence and therefore an antagonist. This place affected her the most in her life, as it caused immense self-loathing, and this is where Lucy's struggle with beauty and her search for an acceptable outward appearance began. On the contrary, Lucy's college, Sarah Lawrence, can be considered a protagonist, a place that helped her find and to truly love and accept herself. She says, "I was shocked to discover that rather than snubbing me, everyone was extraordinarily nice and even interested in me. I was amazed to observe myself so at ease, ready and able to make contact with people. I'd had some friends before college, but they were people I spent time with more than true friends. I would never have considered showing my private self to them. Here, within hours, I was having intense discussions about life, art, all the topics I'd been craving for so long. From the time Lucy was diagnosed with cancer at age 9, she was unable to find true friends and people who were accepting of her strange outward appearance. However, after settling into Sarah Lawrence, Lucy realized this place one of her story's protagonists, was accepting of her regardless of her deviant exterior. The hospital for Graylee, however, played the most important role in that this place acted as both protagonist and antagonist. As a 9-year-old, Lucy was fascinated with the hospital. She made friends with the other children on her ward, received daily gifts from her friends and family members, and best of all to her, she didn't have to return to school. Graylee didn't mind when her family left, and she also didn't mind being fussed over nor the many surgeries she underwent, because the hospital for her was a safe space where she felt she had a true childhood. However, after she started weekly chemotherapy, Graylee dreaded the trip to the hospital she once loved. After enduring a painful weekly injection, she returned home for 5 days of horrible sickness, and all Lucy was able to do was lie in bed. She says, inexorably, Friday, or D-Day as we all began calling it, would approach. Wednesday held anxiety at arm's length, but it was there on the edges, and I knew it. Thursday was almost unbearable. Friday mornings I woke up early, as always, but I did not want to get out of bed, even to go lie on the floor with my best friends, the dogs, who I imagined understood my suffering, and whose wet tongues licking my face weren't random or casual, but pointed, intended, full of sympathy. This treatment lasted for 3 years, but once it stopped, Lucy felt conflicted. Why wasn't I overjoyed? I was almost 13 years old. I'd been doing this since I was 10. I barely remember what life had been like before. No more shots, no more Dr. Wolf, no more throwing up. I was afraid. And I was afraid that I was afraid. Why wasn't I happy the way I was supposed to be? I wouldn't be special anymore. No one would love me. Even after the numerous years of inner and outer torment from chemotherapy, Lucy feared that by losing this place, she would no longer feel special and have somewhere to turn when she felt some sense of normalcy. Both Lucy Graylee and Flannery O'Connor use place as an important yet changing character figure. In Graylee's memoir, A Place Where Lucy Always Felt Comfortable and Happy, her school, proved to play the antagonist during her preteen and teenage years, as she endured constant torment and had very little friends due to the exterior effects of jaw cancer. She did, however, enjoy college at Sarah Lawrence. It was here she made true, lasting friendships and discovered her love for reading and writing, while simultaneously leaving her face uncovered and fearing little about potential ridicule. She finally accepted herself as special and beautiful, which she only previously felt in the hospital. Likewise, in Parker's Back, O'Connor uses a single setting, the front porch, to portray its character shift from protagonist to antagonist. Through his journey through place, Parker realizes he and Sarah Ruth are not right for the other and will never please each other. And, through Lucy's journey, she finally realizes she can find true happiness and beauty as she completes her travels through those places that both positively and negatively impacted her life.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next player is Amanda.
Hi, so my name is Amanda. I'm going to be reading from a research paper that I wrote. I looked at a couple different authors in this piece. I worked with Flannery O'Connor's works, specifically her nonfiction essays. And I also looked at some Maggie Nelson pieces and also Philip Locate's personal essay, Portrait of My Body. I'm going to skip around a little bit in the piece because we don't want to sit here for 20 minutes. But as a writer, I've always flailed against the idea that my words are directly impacted by the fact that I was born and raised in the South. I was born less than 150 miles from Andalusia Farm, where Flannery O'Connor spent much of her writing life. And that fact somehow makes me feel that I'm encompassed by the statements that she makes about the Southern writer. I've never lived in another place, and yet I've always felt like a placeless writer, or at least a writer whose geographical location has not had an overly significant impact on her writing. In regards to the role of place in writing, O'Connor, along with her substantial body of work, has challenged my own conceptions, and she's allowed me the opportunity to examine my own opinions and perceptions of other writers, both through my lens and hers. O'Connor loses me a little bit as a writer and a reader in her essays where she addresses topics like regionality and writing, applying ideas that are central to her own work to the much broader subject of writing in general. O'Connor makes clear her opinion that all good writing is naturally bound to a specific place, In her essay, The Fiction Writer and His Country, she argues that the country that the writer is concerned with in the most objective way is, of course, the region that most immediately surrounds him, or simply the country with its body of manners that he knows well enough to deploy. She argues here that effective writing cannot really be placeless, since good work depends on the ability to mimic the social scene. A writer who attempts to position his writing in a context that's removed from his region will either write with empty imprecision about another place that he cannot with accuracy employ, or worse, his words will simply fall flat, out of context, and unprofitable. She goes further in this essay to state that the writer's value is lost, both to himself and to his country, as soon as he ceases to see that country as part of himself. If I strive to understand these statements from O'Connor's standpoint, and with her work in mind, then it's easy to agree that her ability to explore the social scene of her own region is paramount to the success of her own stories and essays. However, if held up against the works of other writers, the restrictiveness of these statements becomes clear, and I find it easy to see alternatives to O'Connor's methods. In my search to find a piece of writing that successfully and effectively avoided the subject of place altogether, I discovered an essay by Philip Lopate titled Portrait of My Body. While Lopate's essay does still experiment with an alternative concept of place, I would argue that this piece demonstrates that a powerful, effective piece of writing can exist without being tied to a particular physical place. In the third paragraph, Lopate mentions that he grew up in Brooklyn, where he discovered that his shoulders lacked adequate development to become a pitcher. And in the fourth paragraph, he describes an exchange between the author and his sister, which he simply describes as occurring at a beach. In the other 24 paragraphs, Lopate's focus is entirely concentrated on the exploration and description of his physical body. Lopate's narrow focus does not come off as egocentric or peripheral navel-gazing, however, probably because Lopate is not satisfied to stay on the surface of the issue, skin deep, so to speak. His goal is not for readers to finish this piece only with a mental picture of him in his mind. This exploration of the physical self isn't really about the fact that at 17 the author drew a self-portrait of himself, or how he was appalled at his weak chin and pleading eyes. This journey examines the identity of the person within the skin. It attempts to explore the ways his physical attributes have impacted his selfhood, and in doing so, it allows Lopate to begin to think about issues related to his masculinity, his experience with intimacy, and the way his psychology works its way outward to be manifested in personal tics and habits. If Brooklyn had not been mentioned in a passing sentence about his childhood fascination with pitcher Sandy Koufax, I would never have been able to tie Lopate to a particular region. And any intense exploration of place in Lopate's piece likely would have detracted from his highlighting his own body as his own personal somewhere, as the place he resides within. Lopate's piece works in beautiful contrast to O'Connor's idea that a writer cannot say much that is significant about this mystery of personality unless the characters he creates exist within the marks of a believable society about them. Of course, to say that Lopate's piece is void of societal marks would be a gross inaccuracy. However, his use of the narrow, his own body, in order to examine that which is large, his own identity, masculinity primarily, mirrors how O'Connor uses place as a device to portray certain traits and influences on the individual. I have a huge appreciation for O'Connor's work. Her manner of weaving together intricate details like dialect and mannerisms to craft such a stunning impression of the South during the 1940s and 50s qualifies her as one of the most important Southern writers in history. Though her claims about the craft of writing make sense in relation to her own work, I think some of her arguments become problematic when viewed in relation to other writers. The works of Nelson and Lopate have both demonstrated that effective writing can indeed defy some of the limitations found within O'Connor's writing theory. In the work of each of these authors, place plays an important role in the craft of the piece. Each of them, however, utilize the concept of place in a different way and find creative, meaningful ways to weave it into their narrative without necessarily forcing it into a main essential role.
Thank you. Our next player is Sean.
So my paper, my name is Sean Hastings. I'm a junior here at Oglethorpe. Assume I'm the youngest person in this class. And in my paper, I contrasted some of O'Connor's work with the work of other writers in recent time, both who use place in their writing. One is a nonfiction book. It's an autobiography called Professional Idiot. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the, for lack of a better word, a performer named Steve-O. You know, I'm seeing some nods in the audience. And he, not to keep it brief, he's known for doing shows on MTV that show him hurting himself and doing otherwise stupid stuff. Hence the title. The other writer is a man by the name of Ace Atkins. He is from Mississippi. He's written novels set in 21st century Mississippi, and I thought there were some uncanny resemblances between some of O'Connor's work and some of Atkins' work, especially when it comes to the way they describe the settings and the fact that they both take place in the South. It is clear that Flannery O'Connor is writing a narrative about characters who live in a rural environment, away from the comforts ubiquitous to American cities since the mid-20th century. These characters are isolated, self-reliant out of necessity. By contrast, Ace Atkins' use of place shows a time period long past O'Connor's, where many features desired by O'Connor's characters are now a reality for small towns in the South. An example of Atkins' work would be, they reached the Tabea County line, the road sign spray painted over it the words, "Ain't no hope." Quinn recognized some things. Barner's Quick Mart, the small high school stadium where he played football long after they'd been state champs in '78. JT's garage. JT's looked like it had been shut down a while back. In this excerpt, one can see obvious and subtle evolutions that have taken place in the years since Flannery O'Connor was writing. On one level, it is clear that the story takes place close to the modern day, many years after 1979. The graffiti refers to economic stress, possibly the 2000s recession. On a subtler level, the message of a heyday long past can be seen in Quinn's recollection of football and a mechanic who has long since gone out of business. What sort of culture do these places indicate to the reader? The culture evident in Flannery O'Connor's work is one that prioritized pragmatism over aesthetics, one centered around the necessities for survival and productivity in 20th century rural America. O'Connor writes, Tillman operated a combination country store, filling station, scrap metal dump, used car lot, and dance hall 5 miles down the highway that connected the dirt road that passed in front of the Fortune place. What would today be seen to be the focus of several businesses can be seen being owned and managed by one entity. This minimization of human activity shows the importance of place of Flannery O'Connor's work. In A View of the Woods, this isolation is a major factor in the dynamic between characters, whether they be friendly or antagonistic toward each other. Place itself, as well as the culture found within it, can act as a sanctuary or an adversary for characters in fiction and nonfiction. Characters react to an observed place just as readers may. Place can be something that characters cherish, something that acts as an escape from daily reality. An example of this would be the lawn in A View of the Woods. The Fortune house was set back about 200 feet from the road, and it was this 200 feet that he intended to sell, the part that his daughter airily called the lawn, though it was nothing but a field of weeds. In a similar vein, place may not be so much an escape, but a refuge. After being threatened by criminals and spending time in jail, Steve-O relocated from Florida to New Mexico, and recounts immediately noticing a difference. He says, Albuquerque is 2,000 miles from South Florida and looks almost like a different planet. A mile above sea level on the edge of a desert surrounded by the Sandia Mountains. Air is dry and light. Having come from Florida's wet subtropical stew, even breathing felt different. Steve-O's description of place reflects his idea of New Mexico as a place of new opportunities, after all the potential he had squandered and relationships he had destroyed while in Florida. Logically, there must be times where place has an opposite effect, acting in a negative role for the characters. At the end of A View of the Woods, when Mary Fortune's grandfather has a heart attack after strangling her, he fell on his back and looked up helplessly along the bare trunks into the tops of the pines, and his heart expanded once more. Suddenly the whole lake opened up before him, riding majestically in little corrugated gulls toward his feet. In the case of Flannery O'Connor, she uses place as a participant in a character's death during an expiring character's hallucination. This grim isolation that one finds throughout A View of the Woods comes to a head in Mr. Fortune's death, when a hidden evil in the forest that has been hinted throughout the story finally appears.
And last but by no means least, Alex.
I'm Alex. I'm a sophomore here at Oglethorpe. I'm definitely the youngest in the class. And
I apologize.
I didn't realize there was a contest, but okay.
I was just setting the record straight.
Okay.
For this class, the key book that I read was As Nature Made Him, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Girl by John Colapinto. And before this class, I had never really considered the importance or significance of place in an author's life and writing. I had only considered place as an important subject in the work itself and didn't look further than that. But through this class, I learned that the author's place, usually, there's similarities between the work and where they lived that you can see, like in Andalusia Farm and Flannery O'Connor's, a lot of Flannery O'Connor's works, which have similarities between her own life and the lives of people around her. But I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my essay number 3, which was focused on As Nature Made Him. And this paragraph, before this paragraph, the whole story is basically that a 6-month-old boy had a botched circumcision, and after that, his parents took the advice of a strange, almost maniacal doctor named Dr. Money, who suggested that they raise their son as a girl and not tell him what happened to him. And he said that because the child was so young, it would just happen naturally. He would just be raised as a girl and he would just embrace his girlhood without asking any questions, but that isn't what happened, and because of this, their entire lives sort of fell apart over the course of the novel. And,
Is it a novel?
a biography. Place in this work is crucial in the development of David's life, who is the small boy, and the entire Weimer family. The family resides, for the most part, in Winnipeg, but because of the circumstances that they had been given, they traveled annually to Baltimore, more specifically to Johns Hopkins, to see Dr. Money. For David, Johns Hopkins became a place of fear, uncertainty, and trepidation. He recalls the invasive questions he would be asked, and the embarrassing things he would be asked to do, like the sex rehearsal that Dr. Money insisted upon as a real practice. And it is clear from every account of that time that the young David grew to resent the hospital, and likely the entire city of Baltimore, for that matter. Place also becomes central to the story when the family, trying to escape their personal problems in Winnipeg, pick up and move to British Columbia to try and start a new life there. This turns out to be arguably worse for the family than Winnipeg, leading to a suicide attempt by the mother and an affair, along with behavioral problems in both children. The family's trailer burns down, and this was the last thing that they could handle before they moved back to Winnipeg, desperate to escape the desolate cold of British Columbia.
Okay. What you've all got me thinking about, and what we did in this class, in addition to the service learning trip to Andalusia Farm, and I want to again thank Elizabeth Wiley and April Carlson for hosting us and for generating the opportunity for the kind of reflective writing that the students as writers, and I'm going to say we because I actually did a little writing there too, because given the opportunity I will write, for giving us the opportunity to look at the idea of what does place have to do with, how does it impact a writer's work. So I want to go around real quickly. In the class we also read Flannery O'Connor's fiction and nonfiction. We read a biography of the author, part of a biography of the author Zora Neale Hurston, as well as some of Hurston's work, a biography of, it was Madam C.J. Walker, part of Madam Walker's biography, a memoir, graphic memoir by Alison Bechdel, a memoir by poet Nick Flynn, part of a memoir by Southern author Harry Crews, and a biography of Harry Crews, just parts of it, they didn't read all these books. A biography of Hurston by Valerie Boyd, and each of you was asked to select a key book that was life writing of some kind, autobiography, memoir, or biography. So I'd like to ask y'all real quickly to let us know what was your key book, and can you tell us, place, is it in this book? Is it body, is it region, is it culture? We've talked about this before, so we'll start with Dutch. What was your key book, and how would you identify place? Region, culture, or physical embodiment?
Well, my key book was Jay-Z. It was a biography by Jay-Z, by Zach O'Malley. Greenberg.
Yeah.
The biography was called Empire State of Mind, how Jay-Z went from the street corner to the corner office. The setting in this particular biography, I would say, is mostly the body, because it's telling the story and trying to get more insight and personal details of Jay-Z. So I will actually say that the whole book circled around a person. So in that sense, it did not matter if it was just in New York, because he did travel and go on tour. So his setting really didn't matter. Like, I guess the location did not matter. So in this case, it was just following how he became who he is and how he came from the urban area into, again, having his own corner office and actually having a close to multi-billion dollar company.
So that's him no matter where he is.
Yes, that's him no matter where he is.
Amanda? It's custom made for you. Yeah.
Thanks. So I read Maggie Nelson's memoir, The Argonauts. And Nelson was a really interesting writer to study because she really incorporates a lot of theory and research and a lot of just interiority into her writing. So we do have place as a thing in this book. She's from LA. It's important that she lives in California because she gets married to her transgender partner Harry Dodge in the book. So that does play an important role in the book. But I actually talked in my paper and other parts that I didn't read about the setting. And I find that the main place in Nelson's work is really her mind. I think we spend more time in her thoughts and in kind of this web of ideas than we actually do in scenes and physical places, in her interactions. And that's what's really cool about her book to me.
I read Lucy Grayle's memoir, Autobiography of a Face. So when Lucy was 9 years old, she was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer called eating sarcoma, and it was in her jaw. So she went through the rest of her life with a deformed face, for lack of a better term. So I would say that society and culture is kind of her defining place. Her whole life, she kind of just was searching for a place in society and for acceptance and trying to, feel beautiful, as she thought that she should be, that she should be judged on her outward appearance and not what's on the inside. So her whole life she kind of searches for new surgery that would, perfect her face, and she continued to be let down until finally at the end of her memoir she realizes that it's not what's on the outside that truly matters, it's what's on the inside.
The biography that I read was As Nature Made Him, The Boy Who Was Raised a Girl by John Colapinto, and it follows David Reimer's life from birth up until around when he's 31 years old. He eventually, 2 years after the end of the novel,
Novel?
I'm sorry, it's a force of habit.
I know it is, that's all right.
I think that the main sense of place in the biography is the body, because no matter where he was, he didn't feel like he belonged because of what he felt was incomplete about him. He didn't feel like he belonged in his own body, so he wasn't going to feel like he belonged anywhere. And the family, no matter if they lived in British Columbia, Winnipeg, or if they were in Baltimore, he always felt uncomfortable and isolated. And he never truly felt like a part of society either until he started to come into his own and realize that he was born a boy, and he's a boy. And when he starts living his true self, he, for the first time, really is accepted into society as who he is. And so he begins to accept his body as his place.
I read Annie Dillard's An American Childhood, and while I wasn't able to connect to her, but she was a really good writer, and the way that, I guess the biggest focus, at least place-wise for her, was sort of interiority. The book has been described as the story of the development of mind. So it's definitely more where she is inside her head, and how place plays a part, but it's just more the place around where this mind is growing.
So my key reading, as I stated earlier, was Professional Idiot by Steve-O, and I connected with him not in the sense of shared experience, thank God, but in the sense that he's the way he was able to narrate the story, you could see, it's very evident, this is a man who has over a decade and a half of experience entertaining people and captivating an audience. So I just couldn't help but turn page. I would sit down and say, okay, I'm going to read this for about half an hour, 2 hours would go by. And essentially, place in that book, it was interesting to see somebody described going all over the world, particularly at the height of his career. There are chapters that take place on every continent in this story, and I think it's interesting to see how, in contrast to the typical, most people, there's a statistic that says most people die 5 miles from where they were born, within 5 miles.
You know I'm going to want a citation for that, right? Yeah.
I'll give you a footnote after this.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting, so I guess I've always been fascinated by the idea of people who are just migratory, who go all over the world, who accomplish their dreams of seeing what's out there. And the book begins with his birth and ends with him in his late 30s after completing treatment for drug and alcohol addiction. So it ends on a slightly hopeful note.
Okay. One last question for each of you, and then I want to open up to discussion or questions from the audience about the idea of place in writing. Your writing, their writing, books you've read, books they've read. Each person in this class is a writer. I'm here to tell you that. I'm so sorry. News for you, you're all writers. I'd love to know what you think, briefly, a couple minutes from each of you, about what way does place, the concept of place, the evidence of place, how does it impact or come to fruition in your writing? I'm going to start with Sean, move background this way. Going to places, what you've learned by being at Antley Farm, or what you've learned by just going through life and being a writer in a place.
Well, to keep it short, I think it really comes down to the type of place and what sort of experiences I had there personally. I mean, some places I've enjoyed, some places I have disliked. I liked it. Andalusia Farms is a really cool place. You get to see a sort of a snapshot into the past that has been preserved thanks to the very, very hard work of people tasked with preserving Andalusia Farm. But, I mean, Andalusia Farm is one place, but let's say 285 on a Friday afternoon. That's a place. And it's pretty horrible by all accounts. I don't even need a citation for that.
No, you don't have general knowledge on that.
So it really just I think it comes down to just how the place and the character for the person, if it's nonfiction, how the place and the person interact with each other.
Okay, and how you use it as an author. Very good.
Yes.
Hi, Tori.
Hi.
Any thoughts about place in your writing? How you use it? How it comes through you?
You know, I had a thought, and then you rephrased the question, and now my thought's gone, so this is your fault. Place-wise, like, I'm a place-influenced writer in that I can't just write anywhere. Does that sound terrible? It sounds a little terrible. But, like, I was able to write a lot of really nice stuff while I was at Antley just because of, like, the air of the place. So, like, I guess in that, like, I have to be within a place that I'm comfortable and I feel creative to actually produce work. And then, like, place itself, like, even when I'm writing, like, poetry, which tends to be, like, vague and flowery, like, there's still, like, a sense of place to it. There are, like, still small descriptions that are, like, come from somewhere. So, I guess I'm heavily place influenced.
That's fine, thank you.
I'm also heavily place influenced. When I write mostly fiction, and so a lot of the times I'll either take a place that I've been to and just plant it into the story, or I'll take a bunch of very small aspects of places I have been and put them into the story. And I can't create a space from scratch in my head. Every space I've ever written about in my work has always come from a place I've been to or seen otherwise, like online or on TV. And so place is very, very big in my work, and especially places I visit.
Thank you. And
I think place is not only important in my writing, but in all writers' writing, just because it provides context and meaning and background to a story that I think is really important. From a personal standpoint, at Andalusia, I was placed on her front porch, Flannery O'Connor's front porch, and reading Parker's Back, which pretty much takes place on a front porch, kind of made me think that O'Connor was mirroring what her front porch was like and what her front porch was like, you know, in her story. So to be able to read and write at a place where, you know, an author like read and wrote, it kind of, I think, is important to writing.
So I'm kind of the dissenting party in this class on this topic. The title, the original title of my paper was "Flailing Against Flannery." So I had an internal battle with the subject. I don't feel like a Southern writer. I don't feel like the fact that I was raised in Atlanta has had a huge impact on my writing. There are aspects of, you know, where I grew up, the environment that I grew up in, has had a huge impact on what I write. I was raised in a really religious environment, I call it a bubble. So the fact that I was raised in Atlanta isn't really important to me, but other aspects of that environment are. So I'm kind of, the jury is out on where I stand on place, I guess. I don't like the idea, but I'm working with it.
thank you. What about place in your writing, Dutch?
In my opinion, the place actually gives me the story. I don't just come up with a story and like, oh, I want it here or there. I might just be walking somewhere like or a park or a library. Most of some of my writing happened in the library, and it centers around that. But place actually dictates what I'm going to write about. It dictates my characters, the characters' movement, the clothing, the type of clothing they wear. So it really, my setting, it really structured my writing, I guess, to the fullest. And also it helps me explore different backgrounds, as I mentioned earlier. In the sense, I feel like setting does kind of help with your, I guess, upbringing and your language and the way the characters speak. Their jobs, they just hold background. So to me, setting actually gives me the whole story. I might not actually have a plot, but I get a sense of the attitude and the tone and the direction that I want to write in.
And there's always a question with writing, which is which comes first, character or place, you know, for you as a writer. So before we go to questions, is there anything else y'all want to throw out to each other before I open it to the floor? Sir?
Two things.
Okay.
So, going back to what you're saying about character or place, I find what Dutch was saying fascinating because I think I'm completely the opposite when it comes to my writing. Although sometimes, like when I go to places, I get inspired. So in those cases, place will be the first thing that I think about. Generally speaking, I have an idea for a story first, and then characters, and then the setting, and then lastly the character names, because for some reason I'm bad at names. But
Newspapers are good for that. Okay.
second of all, Amanda, I wish you kept that title.
I do too. I didn't feel like it was safe.
Okay. So I'd like to open it to the floor. Any questions for this class? Eli?
Are there any non-English majors up there that went? What drew you to the class?
Well, I'm an English minor, but I chose the class, well, I love Professor Handler, but yeah,
I did not pay her for that.
I'm also really interested in just memoir and autobiography writing.
Any other non-English major? Two of you. Sean and then Dutch.
So I chose this class for 3 reasons. First of all, I am a writing minor, and I'm behind on my minor. And second of all, I met Dr. Handler actually for the first time outside of Oglethorpe. We were both attending a writers event in North Georgia, and when I first met her, she cornered me and she said, "You go to Oglethorpe?" "Yes, ma'am." I've never met you before. I'm a history major. I mean, I haven't taken any writing courses yet.
So
And it was a great start, and things have only we've gotten closer ever since. But she's, you know what, I've learned a lot from you in this class.
I'm a communication major, but the reason I'm in this class, well, I'm going to grad school for creative writing, so I'm trying to learn, again, how to expand on the ideas and, again, character development and how writing, or how writing can be transform into like life writing and actually help people to tell stories. So I thought this would be a cool class to take and learn things from. That's one of the main reasons why I took this class.
Other questions? Elizabeth?
I just wanted to thank you all for what you're doing and for your kind words about Andalusia. Those of us who are in the preservation business have a long view, and preservation always goes hand in hand with access. You can preserve something and keep it in a bell jar, but if nobody has access to it and they don't love it, it has no meaning. So I really appreciate you all connecting to the place. Part of my job is to promote access. So if we were to put together, a tweet or a sort of a quick word to send out there to future audiences, like how do we get more people in? Did each of you come up with 3 words that describe Andalusia in a compelling way that would encourage other people to have a similar experience that you had?
Should they do that now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Some of you try it.
3 words.
Yeah. 140
Maximum
characters.
3 words.
Yeah, okay. Or a hashtag.
I got mine.
Okay, give us yours.
Pristine, preserved, and perilous.
Perilous?
Well, there was a time I almost fell in the barn.
Okay.
Sure,
Preserved.
remember?
Yeah, I might strike perilous. But pristine,
By
preserved.
descent.
Well, if you're a peafowl that gets murdered, I guess it is
Yeah,
perilous.
there you
a lot
go.
of fictional characters died there.
Pristine, preserved,
Whole lot of
peafowl. There you go. Okay. Because we got Manly and Malcolm there. Let's have another one. Anything else? You can go with a hashtag. Think about the idea of, because Elizabeth Peterson from the museum here also gave us a presentation about the role of the writers' houses, right? And the role of preserving or looking at the idea that, writers are people, writers come from a place. What's the value of interacting with that place as a writer or as a layperson? So think about that as well in terms of what Elizabeth's asking you. I like pristine, preserved peafowl. Oh, that's true. See, they're editing me. One other one.
I only have 2 words, like I have connection and creativity, but like, I can't think of the last word. It's just not coming.
Constant.
There you go.
Okay, we can get away from the alliteration. Okay, yeah. Anybody else? And we can get back to you with that too. So, and you've got some,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't work
Excellent.
well on the fly.
Other questions, comments? Raquel and then Kristen.
What would also say about like people who write about settings that are like drastically removed from like their personal experience? Like another one I'm especially thinking of is like Memoirs of a Geisha, which was written by like a white Western man.
And
But
it was not a memoir, it was a novel.
Yeah, it was a novel, but it's been widely claimed to be like a very good novel. Or I mean, I'm sure there's people who would dissent, but overall it's quite enjoyed. Like, what would you say about people who write or the style of writing in a very different setting from your own?
I mean, I thought about that a lot because Flannery, I'm not on a first name basis with her, but in the past we often referred to her as Flannery. She actually addressed that in one of the nonfiction essays that I was reading in my research. And I think she would say that it's really hard to do. It's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to accurately describe a place that is not your own country. The way that I kind of thought about it was all places have certain universal elements about them. And I feel like, novelists in particular have the ability to write about any place. And